Hello and welcome to Audionautic Deep Space Network, episode 172. This is the Independent Musician's Guide to Production and Promotion. And this week we have one more, I think it's one more, because I think this is the last one of the pre-recorded videos we've done as Curtis explores the world on a bit of a vacation. Time to get a break. Everybody needs to step away for a little bit. So we've been pre-recording. This is the last one of these. We'll be back live soon. If you've missed it, let us know in the comments. But today we're going to talk the one thing that changed our production workflows. This is a really interesting topic, I think, and something that I think we can all learn from. So if you have something that changed yours, let us know in the comments or let us know in the Discord. But Curtis, what have you been up to in the 3 minutes since our previous batch recording?
It was going to be an extra minute because we had to
lessening,
restart,
right? We're getting better as we go.
It's almost more efficient. After 4 years of doing this, it only takes us 3 minutes between takes.
Well, it took us 5 for 171, but between 171 and 172, 3. So we're moving up in the world.
It's true. It's true. Well, in the last 3 minutes, I've gone back to Kansas. So I was away last week or 2 weeks ago when we didn't.
In 3 minutes?
Yeah, I was away. I've been studying a lot about Kansas, which is a lot of fun, and looking to integrate sound performance going into a lighting desk and then having those sounds trigger different ways at different times.
That's cool.
That is next level.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun.
Can't you do stuff like that? Is that via MIDI or is that something else?
You can do it via MIDI. I think it's called, it's more common to do it with RTC, which is called, I think it's called real-time code. Don't quote me on that. I'm still learning. But you can do it via MIDI. But another one, you know those horrible sounds that you get of static when you're trying to update something through audio?
Oh, I thought you were just going to say of the music I make.
Well, I was going to say.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that is what that is, and you can send pieces of information through that into a lighting desk. So I've been playing around with that and trying to work out how to do that effectively. And one of those ways of doing it is buying a €5,000 desk, which is something I'm definitely going to do. So yeah, a lot of fun. It's good to step out of like the music production side of things for a while and look at what it is to be a proper lighting tech and see how that can kind of come through. So yeah, I'm happy with that. What have you been up to?
Well, in the 3 minutes, there wasn't a lot of time, so I took a drink of water and then, I was ready to go. So
well, there you go. All right.
No, let's see. I think we've covered everything. Honestly, like I live day by day right now. Mm-hmm. So other than like the Poly and synth update and what's it called? Now I don't even know. That was 2 episodes ago, man. I don't even know what we talked about.
What did you make in Hawaii?
The DAW work, yeah. Well, yes, that's true. I was in Hawaii when I was on vacation, which you're on vacation right now. But yeah, I was on vacation, and it was just iPad, and it was really interesting just being on just a single thing. Right? I had Logic for iPad, so most of my mornings were spent with Logic for iPad. But for a video I made, I just did Koala. And it was really interesting to have that limitation, right? Because they did add a synth, Quokka synth, but it's one oscillator, and I'm not a fan of its filter. I even put in the video, like, I would love to see additional filters, you know, like different 24, 12, all that type of stuff, different types of filters and things like that. Because the bass, you can get decent bass if you make a clone of it and then, you know, make one like a sine or a triangle, make the other like a sawtooth or whatever. But I was lazy and didn't want to spend all that time outside in the sun. So I just did the one oscillator, just a sawtooth. And it was okay. But it was like, I knew I could have gotten more oomph with that bass. And I've done it in some, but that's the thing. It's nice to work in that limitation and just still, even though I knew I wanted more low end, I was like, you know what? That's the song. That's the video, release, and just let it go.
And that's great, and that's awesome. And I mean, it's a really good place to be in that regard, especially like you say when you're on holiday, having those little devices that are portable, get you out the studio, get you out your comfort zone, try something new. But your thing for this whole year has been limitations and working with small amounts of stuff, which I suppose kind of nicely segues into what we're talking about.
Oh, I thought you were purposely segueing to it, but look at that. It was incidental.
Perfectly, right?
I was like, boy, he's lining up this perfectly.
It's almost like I thought ahead.
Yeah.
So this episode we're talking about one thing that changed my production workflow, or our production workflows, because there's more than one of us here, and there's an entire community of you. If you getting into this, see the title and want to put down your 2 cents, either put it in the chat if you're there, or just comment below. We'd love to know, because this is a community aspect. These are essentially round robins. These times that we've been doing it, where we're all about sharing, all about growing together. So, one thing that changed my production workflow, or what is one thing that has what shift has allowed a radically improved session of creativity or efficiency? And I'm introducing it. So, Sunwarper, you're going to go first.
Oh wow, look at that. You had the segue anyways going from that. So I'm trying to think how far down the rabbit hole I want to discuss, because it's kind of like the main thing is less is more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's all these subcategories of it. Basically, I mean the biggest part was switching from primarily DAW based to switching to DAWless, right? Or not necessarily DAWless, but samplers more so. And getting over things like imposter syndrome and perfectionism and things like that by locking in with audio as samples and just being like, well, that's what it is. I guess I could add effects, but I'm just going to use it, and then working through it and still being happy and stoked on the sounds that come out of it and things like that. But beyond that, it was creating, I guess the biggest category would be creating limitation, right? And then go less is more. And then my final, like the real world application of it was going into the sampler based workflow. And really it was getting through the things that held me back. Like, as we talked about, I think it was 170, maybe it was 171. It's been a long recording session, but getting through that 5 or 6 year album project I did, the first album I was making, right? Like, I was so burnt out on creating, and even though I learned so much, it, like, I didn't even think that, because I was just so lost in the DAW. I was tweaking hi-hats endlessly, like, oh, I raised that, but well, now I lowered the bass so the hi-hat sounds louder psychoacoustically, so I better lower that. And then I was recording 8 to 20 guitar takes, not takes, 8 to 20 guitars, which all had 4 to 5 takes, that I was going to, and doing all different kind of effects, because I wanted these big distorted guitars. I love the sound I got out of it, and I learned a lot, but I also learned I never want to do that again. That was the biggest takeaway. And so then I went less and less and less, and then it turned out doing this type of setup really worked for presenting and doing videos on it and things like that. And so it not only changed my production, but it changed my whole kind of musical trajectory and like job, really. So yeah.
I mean, that's perfect. It's great. And it has, in the time that I've known you, your production has changed massively. Always quality, just putting that out there, but it has the sounds that are coming have changed dramatically, and your outlook to how you work kind of move through. And it does, you can see the effects and you can kind of see it coming through. I do think it's ever important to at least sometimes step away from the DAW in that regard, because
and I still work in it. Like, like the album I'm working on, DAW, but I'm thinking of it now as like the MIDI and stuff. It's like the sampler, just line it up, move it around, be done.
Exactly.
Bounce to audio, like, just work quicker in it. And I learned that by doing this other setup. I point down to the desk because that's where all my gear is. Like, that DAW-less setup can now, the kind of workflow and mantra, so to speak, can translate into the DAW.
Completely. And I think that's really important, because especially early on, it's very easy to get tripped and absorbed into the world of the DAW. And the DAW is fantastic. No, we're not knocking DAWs here. They are amazing feats of human engineering. They're beautiful.
Awesome.
Never before has it been so easy to make a sound that comes from your brain and arrange something and create, right?
Yeah.
But there is a lacking of its limitations, in the sense that a big band orchestra, for example, or a quintet or something like that, they have limitations and they have tangibility in the real world. DAW is nonetheless a piece of software. It is all digital, it's all virtual, it's not real. And that, in that sense, it is somewhat separated or somewhat different to the world of music making in the real world.
It's just the option paralysis too, right? Because you open a blank screen, and first of all, you've got that blank screen. Where do you want to start, right? Usually I'll just go like make a drum loop or use Logic Session Drummer and get something on the screen that I can go from. Or if I've got a piano idea, or guitar, put that in. But from there, it's like you've got all these kind of effects you can put on. You've got all these kind of plugins you can add, synths, drums, basses. It's just like you can get bogged down in that if you think that way, and maybe you don't, and that's great, but it's easy to get lost in that kind of like, well, there's so many options, where do I go? And on the other end, right, like we talked about in 160 something, it all runs together because it was last week for us, but you're watching this, it's like 2 months ago. But I was talking how I had this convoluted DAW setup idea where I was going to have all kinds of live looping parts and the MIDI sequencing and sampling and like all that and effects and all of that. And then it was like, that's too much option paralysis, right? And too many things to know and try to keep track of. So I pared it down to the basics, right? Just a sampler and a synth or something like that. So it's not like DAW-less or hardware setups are immune to that idea as well. You can grow a hardware setup to this massive thing, and then you're right there. Like even you're working on a DAW-less setup that has the mixer and all of that, and like that can get overly complicated too if you want it to, and sometimes that's really cool, but sometimes you're just lost in the cabling and the routing and the setup when you could be creating.
Yeah, and I think it completely, and it's good to know where your balances are, right? It's good to know where you're at. You can always grow your rig, and there will always be a point where your rig can always get bigger and your rig can always get smaller. There are limits to where that can be, and that limit is generally how well you know your gear, right? So if you try and expand your studio beyond the capabilities of you knowing where your synth comes into line in comparison to the rest of the synth, or how it's routed, or how to get the best sound out of it, once you get to a bigger rig, you're just going to run into problems. And so having those limitations in that regard as well is a really good way of kind of minimizing that and gaining. We spoke about this in 168. It was the first.
It's getting really hard, man, to remember these numbers.
I know. We were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, definitely within the confines of this summer batch recording, about having a deep knowledge of your gear and having and not hiding experience with fun sounding synthesizers. You got to know your synth. You got to know what you're doing deep down, and that is the same for your DAW. Sometimes we get a better clarity of things when we step away for a while. So stepping away from the DAW, making music with the device in the same way that a saxophonist would pick up their saxophone and start playing is a really good way to just play, and it's really important to do.
Yeah, totally. Well, what about you? What's the one thing?
I think it harks similarly to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, but it's I still work with the DAW, and I like the way it works right now, but it's keeping a tidy DAW. So I have creating templates, creating a consistent limitation within the box itself that has allowed me every time I open up my template to just get playing. I'm not right clicking and making channels. I'm not moving things around. I'm not building channels on the fly and then grouping them. They're already grouped, that kind of thing. I know exactly where my hardware is in the DAW itself. Like, I use Ableton as a glorified multi-tracker and looper, essentially. So, the hardware is primary and then the DAW comes second. But within that digital representation of the hardware, it's in the same place with the same color, with the same number at every single time. So I'm not coming to the DAW and trying to work everything out. I'm just turning it on, hitting record, and then just playing. And that is, I find, especially when I'm not in a broken down rig, when I'm not in I've taken stuff away out of the studio, when I'm working with the main rig, which is at this stage quite large, it allows me to focus on the music as opposed to tinkering with routing options and things like that.
Yeah, and that's what matters, right? The music. Like
Yeah.
it's just so easy to get lost on these rabbit holes of
Yeah.
plugins, gear, effects chains, this and that, different synths and all that, where it's like, well, that's awesome and it's fun, but sometimes it's nice to just spend some time doing the music part, the part that
Completely.
matters, like getting that creative expression out.
Completely, and I think it's something that I want to talk about more. I think once I get to releasing the album that we're talking about, because I've noticed there is that, and that's totally valid and it's totally real. I think there gets to a stage as well where unrealized and unresponsed imposter syndrome and anxiety can manifest as procrastination. And
Oh,
so,
totally.
yeah, and so the idea of tinkering, as I've come to call it, with either a rig or a template or something comes because deep down you don't want to finish the tracks in which you've started, because finishing the tracks that you've started means that you have to release them and start putting yourself out there again. And I
Yeah.
think that, you know, it's all, especially again, that ties massively into option paralysis with the DAW. When you've got infinite possibilities, it's so easy just to keep on tweaking, as opposed to make a clean decision and then just get on with the work in which you're making in that time. And I
Yeah.
do, and creating this to be fair, it is ever evolving, and but creating these templates nonetheless, and creating these limitations within the DAW has allowed me just to get on and just allow me to get on making music. And in every stage of my spreadsheet of the different albums I'm working on, you can see how the template fuses in and creates that structure for me to not get lost in that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. That's a very good point, though, of how it can manifest. You know, imposter syndrome and perfections of anything like that can manifest as these procrastination. You're making progress, right? Like it's a very misleading thing, because you're making progress, you're learning new setups, you're creating new workflows and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, are you creating or are you just tinkering, right? You know, like, is something getting made, or is it just you messing with more things? And like we talked about in these numbers, man, 170, whatever, where it's like, let go when you're working on something and let it be a creative snapshot of who you are as an artist in that moment. You know, because you can always learn more, but sometimes you need to set that stage, right? And be like, this is who I was in 2025. This is the type of music. This is the sound I made. This is the production knowledge I had. And then in 4 years or whatever, which, wow, oh man, I don't want to think about dates anymore. But in 4 years, you're like, oh yeah, I remember I did that. You know, I listened to a song I did in 2020, and I remember that I did this really bizarre thing where I would cut tons of the mid range from the guitar, you know, and like it was just for that one
Classic,
song.
yeah.
Like, it was just for that one song, and there was a reason for it at the time that I thought it was doing. But when I look at it now, I'm like, what the, you know, like, why?
Completely.
Because when I re-released the track, I just bypassed that EQ, you know, like not doing that. And it was like crazy how much I changed the mix when I was reworking that track. Was that I think that was 2022, and actually no, that song was from 2016, which makes
Completely.
even more sense why it was so different. But yeah, when I redid it in 2022, I just like changed so many things, and then it was really crazy to see all of the different aspects I would do, like different applications of sidechain, different EQs and compression on the kick, an aux channel for the drums where I did all sorts of different things, like just completely different. And I used to always do this thing, and sometimes it's fun to do, send every melodic sound into a bus channel that's got all these sorts of delays and reverbs, and then you sidechain that to the kick, and you put it really quiet in the mix, and it just creates this really thick, like, reverb background sound by the kick and even the snare times. It's a really cool thing, but like, I just don't do it much anymore because it's just so much
Yeah,
extra
totally.
effort.
And
But it is an interesting, if you want more of that like constant like wall, like shoegazy kind of background. It really does something when you're really quiet and it's just getting sidechained because it's just this background movement. But yeah, it's what I'm getting at is it's cool to take that snapshot, because then you can look at it a couple years from now when you have learned more, because you've been applying all these things you learned to new songs, and you're like, whoa, yeah, that's right. And
Yeah,
I still love the original version of that song I did, but
but
it is who I was in that time.
well, exactly. And I mean, we spoke about this 2 episodes ago, briefly towards the end, about seeing the woods from the trees and taking a step back, like you say, letting go in that notion. And this kind of echoes in that same way. You've got to create a limitation in order for things to go, whether that be a limitation, i.e., stepping out of the DAW, or having just say one synth. Right now, you're playing with an SP and the Poly N synth, right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just playing with 2 boxes, you've got to create that limitation. But when it comes to your workflow in producing it, having a set sound, so to speak, or a set way of doing things, which is obviously malleable. We like to be flexible here. There's not saying we're not going to be flexible, but having a flow that works for you and kind of sticking with that at least for a little while, before it evolves, gives you a time to stay with the music and gives you time to stay with what you're doing, as opposed to getting around and just trying to tinker again. It's really important to create discipline, because once you've done it, you've truncated it. It's a moment in time. You can freeze it in carbonite, and then you can come back to it later on.
Yeah, I love that reference, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say Han Solo's character arc. He had to get into the carbonite to become the more gentle, lovable rogue than he was at the beginning in episode 4. That's what I'm saying.
Brilliant. Look at that. Look at that. It's poetry. It rhymes.
Exactly. So yeah, we're coming up to the time on this one. This is our last batch recording before we return. We will be back next week, and we'll be in August by that point.
Oh my God.
Late summer by that point. We'll be in late summer.
That's insane.
I know.
We're
right?
recording this on June 1st.
Right. And this is coming out at the end of July.
Yeah.
But it's just a testament, because, part of our strategy has been to plan further ahead. So yeah, we're doing that. But yes, the reason that we are here is down to our patrons. And so we want to thank them on the way out. And we look forward to hanging out with them more in the live scene when we return next week. But our patrons are the reason that we're here, because they are the ones who've essentially paid for this platform. They're the ones who keep supporting us week in and week out. And we thank you ever so much for your continuous support, and we really appreciate it. If you like what you see here or what you are hearing here, and you want to support us and help grow the channel, head across to patreon.com/audionautic for $3 a month, which is really cheap right now. It's where it starts. You get access to a whole load of community extras, which really...
Sorry, wait, is it 3 or 2?
It's $3 now. Is it 3? Oh no!
I never
sorry,
changed it. Is it still 2?
it's $2. Yeah, I don't know why. I know why it said 3, because I recently subscribed to a different Patreon that was 3. So there we go. But yeah, $2 a month gets you down into the community, and it's a really good place if you like what we do, and we're sharing ideas and coming together and helping each other with a production. It's there. It's a really good place to be.
Yeah, and if you do the $5 tier, you can also come on the show, share your opinions, and if something like Spotify is frustrating you, you can vent, or there's always news about Spotify that we cover, and typically we have some patrons, let's just say that love to share their opinion about Spotify and anything else, but we love to have those discussions, and we love to hear everyone's different opinions, because that's how we come together as a community. We learn different things. And it's always great to hear from everybody when we have our star streams, our monthly hangouts, about where we're going with our setups. I still can't get over that Hydro Fighter has just completely just shunned the DAW. I mean, this is someone who we've had him on Lightspeed to talk, but like templates with all these crazy, awesome workflows in Ableton to just like not pump out music, but like get past that kind of blank screen with all these really cool settings and generative things and drum sounds and stuff like that. And then he's like, I'm limiting to 3 pieces of hardware or 4 pieces, and that's it. Like, that's such a change. And yet we've seen this in the course of 3, 4 years that we've been doing it. And he's been a patron, that, just cataloging this journey, and we get to just be along for it and see. And we all grow. Like, we're here talking about the way our setups have changed. And we just love talking about that stuff. And so if you want to have more of that, head to the Patreon, but you can also head to our Discord. It's open for all. Is it discord.com/audionautic? I don't know. But anyways, there's a QR code there, and the link is in the description if you're watching this on your phone or listening on Apple and Spotify. And I didn't mention this in the other ones because I don't have my awesome chat reminding me. But yes, if you dig these videos, leave a like, subscribe, share. It helps a ton if you're on YouTube. And if you're watching on Apple, Spotify, any other streaming platforms or podcast platforms, leave a review or a rating if it will let you. Some of them do, some of them don't. And then you can also support us directly. You can scan that QR code right there. Curtis has all these QR codes just ready. But yeah, it has been great hanging out with you all. We're very much looking forward to being live again as our usual thing. But I would love to hear if you like these sort of pre-recorded videos, let us know, because we're always looking to adjust and make changes depending on what our community wants to see. But sometimes these are good and they are a little helpful for us as very busy people to get some breathing room. So if you do enjoy these sort of things or want to maybe do these where we get recommendations from the community for what to cover in these sort of like extended round robins, let us know in the comments. I'm so used to saying chat because of the live streams, but yeah, let us know in the comments or over on the Discord, and we'll see you over there. And we'll be back next week, 11 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for watching.